Right, so 2024. Third year running of doing these wrap-ups. We've survived long enough to make it a trilogy somehow. So that's already good in its own right. I suppose I'll start this the same way I start any old wrap-up video, the life update portion, you know, things that have been going on, either relative to me, maybe to the rest of you, and sort of summarize how this entire project has progressed over the last year or so. Now, as we know, following on from last year, we're still stuck in the portion of this where we're trying to wrap up the third season. We're trying to get that finale out the way and you know, sort of put this season to bed, because it's been running for about let's see, anywhere within the realm of 4 to 5 years, maybe longer than that. So it's been the longest one going, or actually no, is it 4 to 5? Somewhere between 3 to 5. I haven't actually looked at the starting point date of this. It has dragged on for a while though, and we're all feeling it because it is it's gone on for way longer than it's needed to. But you know, like I said in the last update, I was looking to try and wrap that up this month, but it's just not happened. Obligations, finishing last week's of work, obviously the World Championships that happened, process of buying presents, seeing, well, a member of family, I suppose. And, you know, just the same thing that everybody else is going through around this time of year. It's just panic. But that brings me to the next point, is where exactly do we go in January with this? Now, there are some things that are happening in the first month of 2025 that are going to slow progress a little bit. Readily so, whereas I originally stated that I wanted to get this wrapped up in January, over the 3rd of January, I'm actually going to be moved to temporary accommodation because of some council works that are going on in the house, which is obviously going to impede progress because, you know, I won't be home in my comfortable environment to try and finish that off. I don't know what the situation is going to be with that. I don't really have the details. All I know is that we're going to be there from anywhere between maybe the 3rd of January up until possibly, however long it takes, could be there up until like the 11th, maybe. So it is going to be a whole week where nothing really happens in that regard. There's also the matter of there's also the matter of you know, a passing in the family. There is, personally, it's not really somebody I found myself so close to that it's tearing me up, but obviously it is somebody I have known in my life that holds, you know, a certain level of significance as any other family member does. But that is going to take me away from anything I am doing on that day as well, because obviously, you know, it's like it's the final goodbye, so that takes priority. That, I believe, will happen during the period that I am away in temporary accommodation, the 8th of January, I believe. Yeah, that's really all I'm going to say about that, because it's not a topic I need to go too much into. But one other thing that I do need to address in regards to this project is the behavioural habits of certain members within it. Obviously, myself included, Mr. Overly Sarcastic over here. Obviously, I addressed earlier within the year that there are certain behaviours within our group that are sort of becoming hostile. Or rather dismissive, passive-aggressive, however you want to label it. Now, the situation since then has improved. Yeah, there's not really as many present issues as there were before, but there is still a certain level of stigma when it comes to this that sort of makes the environment uncomfortable to be around part of the time. There's very dismissive reception and a lot of cutting in edgeways, you know. It's mostly notable with controversial topics. But I mean, I suppose a conversation is going to go that way with any sort of controversial topic. But the point I'm trying to make in regards to that is that we need to cut the shit. We need to cut it, right? Because it's only going to come back into this cycle, as it has for the last year or so, if we continue to foster it. So the best thing to do in that regard is to, you know, grow a pair of bollocks and just fucking cut it out, because that's the only way that we're going to get around this, is if we try to stop reinforcing the negative and look more at the positives that are present within those situations. And for any of you that, you know, don't know what I'm talking about, it mostly lies within general conversation. But again, not too much needs to be said on that, because it's not really the point of making this video. The Scrypt is one thing that has sort of been on the up and down with sort of activity. It's most of the activity has come from the art channel, because obviously so many of us in that server are artists. We all draw in our own right, and we use that medium for whatever means necessary. But for the things I've put forward for that, I've obviously known that there is little to no activity happening in it whatsoever. But the particular thing I want to address to begin with this is that I'm gonna remove certain portions of the server, because they're out there for people to use and nobody uses them. So effective from 2025, I'll be removing the Ask the Cast and the Q&A channels, because those were initially put in place as sort of seat warmers, bench warmers, if you will, to try and get to know the cast involved with those certain projects. But it seems that nobody is really interested in anyone or anything to do with that. So I'm just going to remove it, because what's the point of keeping something that's getting no use? It's just going to sit there and collect dust. And you made that happen. Yes, I'm looking directly down the lens when I say you in particular. And I'm not going to say names, but you know who you are. In fact, I'm going to flip my lenses up just to look you in the eye and say you know exactly who you are, right? So following that, the recent addition of the Source Me channel, which was used to find hard to find mediums. So it could be songs, images, anything of the like that would go into that channel, and I would obviously find the origin point of where that come from, so that you could then check out the rest of the format for that. That's also something that's garnered no activity. It's had one or two things placed in there, and either you guys are finding the things by yourself, you're finding the sources for yourself, or you don't intend to find them, or you don't need them. And something I put in there to try and sort of pick up traction is also just, you know, it's not serving a purpose. So effective 2025, that's going to go as well, because fuck it. Yeah, I mean, it's not doing anything. There's no point having it there, right? Now, to get on to the last thing, this was something I mentioned last year as well, that I felt was going to be... Not even I felt even. It was something I was planning to do throughout this year before, you know, everything else started happening. Now, I did notice that work was going to take more of a precedence. Now, to be fair, on the coaching side of things, I have been more involved, right? I have had more choreography to do, as this year was the first... It was the first time I actually put choreography together for our annual show, which I'm actually quite proud of, and I'm quite proud of the students that I had for that to go forth and actually perform that. I mean, you always expect something to go one way when you have it in your head, but to actually see it happen out on the floor is an entirely different thing. So, coming back to what my original point made was, last year I stated that I was going to make a mod tool for a game that we played before called Monster Prom, right? Obviously following the Monster Anthology series. I've only done like one or two things for that visually in total. I've not even put a storyboard together for it yet, because I was still trying to figure out the roster. Now, the prep for the finale of the third season of DBR sort of took precedence over that. I had more things that I wanted to add to that because I had a set number of CG I wanted to create, but to try and enhance the experience, I then decided it would be best to double down and put all my time into that. And quite frankly, even though we've only got through, I want to say about 30% of it, we're still I've still been satisfied with what's been made for it, and practically can't wait to show you what the rest is. But it's something that's probably going to have to go on the low priority list, to be honest, because everything that I've done around these projects has taken a higher priority, and it's just more it's more of the visual and illustration side of things that I'm doing for these projects that I'm focusing more on than a game that we've sort of just fallen out of playing. So maybe it's just something I'll do on the side for my own personal enjoyment. Obviously, when I do finish them, they will still be publicly available so that you can experience it, but I'm not going in with the mindset that it's something we're all going to take to anymore, because it seems the interest has gone away. So why am I going to waste my time, you know? I'll put it on low priority, I'll keep it there, and whatever happens with that will be what happens, right? That's really all in terms of the script. Now, to revisit the roadmap of the SSU in total, right? We do this every year, just to see what works have been finished, what works have been created, what's in priority, and the externals. So if you take a look at the current roadmap for what's happened this year, effective from December 22nd, this is the current roadmap for the SSU going forward. Now, as you can tell, obviously the completed works haven't changed because we're still sort of in the same phase of completion with those. Those are the current running projects. So we've got DBR No More Angels, which is the finale piece to this season, and DBR Edge of Justice, which is the hiatus event that connects between seasons 3 and season 4 K-side, chronologically speaking. Now, the prioritized works haven't really changed much from last year, actually. In fact, there's only one new addition to that roster as is. The roadmap as we have it here, obviously DBR First Paradox is the top priority project at the moment. Has been for the last year or so, or however long it's been since I proposed that so that we could redo the first season. Tales of Altera, which is something I'm going to talk about a little bit later on, is not quite second priority, but it's up there. It's probably in my top 3. And DBR Chronoverse. Well, it should just be Chronoverse at this point, but it's still got a DBR label on it. As you know, Chronoverse is still in that phase where it's building, but very slowly, right? And we've known this. We've known since last year, where I just said it was completely fucked, right? Because everything else keeps appearing over it, right? But it's necessary for those things to be on top so that it gives more material to work with when it comes to Chronoverse, right? But obviously these are all points that I'm going to talk about separately. Now you'll notice the new works are all titles that you have heard of. Last year, I believe we had With Great Power, Stigma, and DBR The First Realm. Now, those works are still, in production, or rather, they're in concept phase. But following the announcement that I made earlier in the year about the 0 priority marks, they will fall into those. DBR The First Realm is not something I actually need to cover until after the relevant point. In fact, it probably won't even come back up again until after Chronoverse has concluded its first part, right? because there are very prevalent lore points within the First Realm that relate to how the entire SSU functions as it is, right? So, given the relevancy to those facts and Chronoverse, there's going to be no need for me to approach that again until we're at a further point in Chronoverse where things are starting to come to light and context is required. Stigma is still Stigma. I did drop a sort of synopsis of it before, but I've deleted that and I'm taking a different approach with Stigma because I'm realizing that what I had before stuck too close to the original story that was back when I was like fucking 12, 13 and didn't know how to put shit together, right? So I'm looking at it from a different perspective now and I'm going to turn it into something that's a bit more fitting of its own title. With great power is obviously with great power. Spider-Man fans will know the deal. Spider-Boy fans are seething because Spider-Boy isn't a real fucking Spider-Man and he doesn't deserve his fucking title. And you know what? Frankly, it needs to be said with the megaphone. Fuck you, Zeb Wells. You have ruined the comic run in its entirety. And yeah, practically all that needs to be said about that on that matter. Now, those were last year's new works. The works for this year mostly revolve around First Paradox because the longer I spend building the initial season, the more I realize that everything that follows is really falling nicely into place. I am going to talk about those titles separately in just a moment, but we are going to keep moving through this. Now, Pokemon World Circuit, a surprising addition to the list of productions being made, but funnily enough, coming back to the series in a more modern game has sort of reignited my perspective on why it is such a beloved family title, right? Not to obviously mention the addition of new designs. There's also the situation with Power World. Nintendo's really fucking itself up, and that's not very cool bananas of it, right? So somehow they got the patent removed to throw fucking balls at things. Like, literally the act of throwing a ball is a patent that they are claiming belongs to them. Which, I don't know if they've ever heard of fucking any sport ever, but that is not something that belongs to them. So how they got away with that in a court of law is beyond me, but you know what? Nintendo is really just scraping the bottom of the cheese grater with that one, right? Cool. So, right, back to where we were. The latest work, Suterareta Mono Toshite Ikiru, Living as the Forsaken, is the first sort of true solo write on the SSU board, right? Now, I say that purely because when it comes to other things that I've claimed as solo writes, they're not purely mine, right? So all the ones that I've mentioned as solo writes for DBR and such, they still follow a world that has featured something from all of us, right? Now, Final Fantasy Soldier Outclass, while it is a solo, right, are not completely my assets, are they, right? I've featured a line of original characters, but then there are assets and inclusion of a world that is not of my own making, right? So this new work is the first one where I've actually built it from the ground up, from something that people won't exactly expect. Now, the theme of it will become clearer as we get into it, whenever that may be, but I've already dropped a synopsis and an illustration of the main heroine, so it's not something I'm going to really go into. The external works are still the same, right? Because they're the only projects on the SSU board at the moment that are actually headed by somebody other than myself. So, A Demon's Bond is Kazuki's, and Chronoverse and it's all of its contingents belong to Halo. Now, obviously, I do have inclusion within those projects but my role is more so that of a participant and occasional, producer for it. It's not like I have a long standing for it. But as a whole, that's what the production plan is looking like going forward. Now, the things I want to go on to next. First Paradox. Let's start there, actually. First Paradox originally started as just a means to redo the first season and regain a script just sort of lost to the original DM of what was originally D&DB, which is what DBR was formerly known as when we were just doing it as a Dungeons and Dragons format. That whole story is in the 2022 video, so if you don't know or you've forgotten for whatever reason, you can always go and check out that video. Now, the more I've put down for FP, the more I've begun to realize that it's becoming its own thing, right? It's still DBR as we know it, but it's DBR taken into an actually original direction, in the sense that we're not working off of a pre-made story. This is a new starting point for the same story that will take a different direction. It's guaranteed, right? Because the roster that we're starting with already features so many people that we have not seen in the run of DBR before, right? The plot surrounding First Paradox is something that I've not used in DBR before, right? So it's actually quite exciting to revisit this and take my time to sort of dig up the treasure, have a bowl. The things that I do want to talk about, though, are new features that are coming with it, right? Now, I was going to talk about the guide in this video. I was going to give it a recap, but I think I'm going to do that in a following video, which will be the first one of 2025, right? And I say that like I'm planning to make a whole bunch, but I'm not, right? The exciting thing about First Paradox is that I get to try some things that I've always wanted to, that I haven't been able to pull off before, right? And I think you all know where I'm going with this, right? I want to make animated scenes for First Paradox. Now, no, wait. Don't get out of your seat just yet. Don't get too fucking excited, right? When I say that, I'm not going to be making like fucking Xenoverse 2 cutscenes in like 3D CG. I'm not going to run up the old fucking blender and do it like I have a mocap suit like Russian Badger or Lythero, I guess. It's more so going to be animation loops, right? It's going to be GIFs. It's not going to be a full cutscene of animation, but it is going to be a little more than what I have already made, right? I've made 2 so far, and only 2. Or at least I've made 2 that I've considered completed. That would be the bacon one. You know which one I'm talking about, especially you, Jordan. You know what the fuck I'm talking about. And the Chronoverse one that featured a little ditty M, like, So I want to take that format that I've worked with already, and I want to use that. I want to harness that and actually apply it to something. Now, of course, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, and the case may be that I don't actually manage to finish any, right? But it is something I'm still going to try to do because I need to. I've felt over the last year or so that yes, while I can create stuff, the effect has lost its luster, right? My prowess is no longer the exciting thing that it once was, okay? I remember back when I started illustrating for this stuff that it felt like it was new. It felt good to have that because it was a new thing I was bringing to the table, and it was something that didn't always happen. There's very few actual CG pieces in the run of DBR as it is, right? But even now, when I have a much better ability of that, it still doesn't feel like the reception is all there, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm not admonishing anyone's excitement or saying that there is no reception at all, because it's not true, right? There is reception of it as it stands. But as somebody who visualizes these things, as somebody who illustrates these things, I'm not personally satisfied with the level of reception. And that's just the way it is, right? I can't force it out of people. I can voice my discrepancies or my dissatisfaction with it, but it doesn't actually change anything. The only way I'm going to pull that is to step up myself, right? Now, whether that needs to be that I render more, which frankly I don't do, I rarely ever do that, or whether it's something, there's a mark that I'm aiming for that I'm not quite hitting, regardless of what it is, I feel like the next step is to go and try to animate for the story. So hopefully when it comes to First Paradox, that will be something that happens, okay? That will be something I go towards. Now, following that, First Paradox 6. First Paradox 6 is a part of the First Paradox story that happens before the prologue, right? It happens roughly about a decade before First Paradox's first season does, okay? In fact, no, it doesn't. It happens about 16 years before, because the premise of First Paradox is that it covers the events that lead to what is now Neuroplaga, right? Neuroplaga, the massive conglomerate that essentially runs the backbone of Lofal, back when it was but a smaller business, a smaller enterprise that was offering an opportunity for something that Lofal had not had before, right? It follows the initial Neuroplaga, like the mercenary unit, which is labeled Nero 6. Now, the convenient label of that title obviously does follow the main title of the season, but the main reason that it's labeled as First Paradox 6 is because it will follow the events of the City 6 disaster, which is a mass collapse of a city that caused hundreds of orphans, right, for Lofal, right? But there's also an ulterior tone to it that will be explained within the first season. But First Paradox 6 serves more as sort of a prequel, if you will, a prequel of sorts, because it's not a direct correlation, but it does explain some functions within the first season, and it will explain a few lore grabs between the lines, right? Now, following that, First Paradox Andromeda, which will be the hiatus season that happens between the first and the second. First Paradox Andromeda is essentially the first actions of everyone after the barrier around Lofal is broken and the first season's events conclude, right? But the primary plotline that we will follow regards Dr. Haloth Miser, who, as we currently understand, is one of the 10 deep ground scientists. Obviously, this confirms that she lives through the season, because, I mean, how are you going to have a whole thing dedicated to a character and they don't survive? It just wouldn't make sense. I can't speak too much on it. I can't give away more than I've already given in the synopses, but those of you that understand why it is titled Andromeda will be able to tell what exactly is happening. Andromeda is really just to set up some additive effects for future seasons of First Paradox, right? Because I'm already looking at this with a long roadmap. I'm already looking at the bigger picture when it comes to this. I'm not concrete in everything I'm doing in it, but I figured out where I want to go at the beginning, at least. The final thing I want to mention for First Paradox is the inclusion of First Paradox Future Fragments, which will serve as the second season to First Paradox. Now, I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens or sort of the situation around that, right? Nothing aside from what I've already given, but what I can say is that future fragments acting as the second season will reflect some of the things from the 4C run, right? There will be returning themes. While everything will not be the same as it was, there are things that we are going to see as we did in that season, okay? Now, so much happened in that you can cherry pick any little part that you want and figure it out for yourself, but you're not going to get any answers from me outside of what I've given you, okay? So my advice to you is that if you really want to know and you can't wait, take a look and nitpick at the little things that I've given you and figure it out, okay? Moving on to the next portion, I want to talk about DBR and some of the proceeds that follow that, right? It's important to note that over the last couple of years, participants from certain individuals has faltered, right? I'm not going to harp on about this. I'm going to use that as the starting point, and I'm going to lead that into what I actually want to address. The reliability of participants within the projects makes things uncertain in way of direction. Now, what I mean when I say that is, while I plan the roadmap and the plot line for anything going forward, I have to take into account through everything I've done leading up to this, where the participant is, right? Where the commitment is. Now, this does affect my judgment for where I want to put you in these projects, right? If I feel that somebody in particular isn't exactly reliable when it comes to performance, then I am going to have to look at it in equal respect, which means going forward, if I don't think I can trust you to be there when I predict you'll be there or when it's necessary for you to be there, I'm going to lessen your role. That doesn't have any restrictive effects, right? Because it's not like I'm going to keep you under lock and key or give you a fucking curfew with this shit, because it's not like this is fucking playtime and you've been bad and I'm putting you on the fucking naughty step, right? It's not the same logic. But what it means is I'm not really going to give your roster high priority roles if I don't think you're going to come through. It's as simple as that, right? There is no sugarcoat. Leading on that though, as I mentioned, in fact, I'm going to pull up the exact announcement that I made this statement on, which I believe was the last major one. Here we go, yeah. So I'll put it up for you here so that you can read it as we go, but as I stated in the Director's Dilemma and Participants Notice, details planned for future seasons of 4C and other relative projects that are not currently hinted or established are no longer being assumed with guarantee. The reason for this is out of liability and lack of productive yield from particular participants. This will mean that some expected events, relations, or levels of priority are subject to change with no further notice, which is basically extending on what I've just said, right? This also takes into account that while we are creators of these stories, we're equal parts pro shippers, right? Yep, that's right. We're the captains of our own fucking ship. We hoist the sails, put it out to sea, and why is the rum gone, you know? So while we have ideas of where we want certain things to go, if there's nothing really backing it solidly as it currently stands, it will mean, just so I really drive this home, and just so you actually understand what I'm trying to get across here, nothing is guaranteed. Now, I've always put that message out there, but I've still geared things so that they work out in the end, right? What I'm saying with this statement, basically, is that I'm not putting anything in guarantee if it has no backbone, right? So things that have been set up, or more specifically in this term, pairings, pretty much, if there's no backbone to it, it's no longer a guarantee, okay? If there is nothing built on top of that, there is no point in trying to guarantee it if I cannot rely on any sort of contingency that it will follow through, right? Which means it may be that I find an alternative method through myself, right? And I'm only saying that in the sense of my own content, right? It does not directly affect anyone else because it's only fair that everyone gets equal chance. But whereas I'm concerned and I'm trying to build something for my roster, it may be that I just decide, you know what, I'm only going to rely on myself here, okay? I don't want to harp on too much on that one because it just sounds dickish in my head the more I talk about it. The last thing I sort of want to mention with the proceedings of DBR is that in future, I may start making sub-stories that cover loose ends or give needed context for things that haven't been rounded off in DBR as of right now. Because I've noticed through rereading there were a lot of plot points or relevant factors that were sort of left unanswered. Now, they're not major things that have left out such important context that we're still confused up until this point, or rather, anything that has still yet not been explained, right? So, give you an example. There are certain things in Season 3 that have been left unanswered that will get answered in the finale, right? And there are things that in Season 3 haven't been answered, or Season 2 that haven't been answered that may need context or need to be rounded off, right? The sub-stories will be for that. They will exist in the same server as all the other DBR content because there's no point me making a whole different thing for it if it relates to the same thing. But you may find that some of those pop up in the future. I don't have any plans or anything set right now to explain any, but through what I know, I will want to create context for that, and it just, you know, it's going to be the way it is. Nextly, yeah, totally. He's a fucking idiot. Where I want to go next is talking about my role in ADB. Now, as you understand, I already put out an announcement at some point this year that I was removing my assets from ADB, right? Because of the lack of evidential production and just all the things that I mentioned in that one announcement about the director's dilemma. All right, I'm not gonna redo all of that because we get the gist, right? But specifically, what I want to say about my participants in ADB is that obviously I'll still be participating, right? I'm not gonna suddenly decide to stop. But I'm stepping down from the subsidiary DM role, right? I've decided all the context that I sort of wanted to give my roster in ADB is not really easy to fit in without complicating who's leading what part in the story, right? So, as far as the roster's concerned, it will stay, right? Anything that I need to fill in that roster space will remain as it was. So obviously the cadets are the first example. The Kanemoto Royal Army captains will stay because it's like they're already so set for that environment. There's no point me removing them, right? But a lot of characters that I had planned for ADB, just there's no point me including them anymore. One, because it's an excess of work, and two, it's not easy for me to sort of know what direction I can take these things without having that context. And frankly, even with the context I've been given, I don't really have it matted out in my head, right? So for the benefit of an easily told story, I'm just going to step away from that subsidiary DM role. The only point where I should take any role in that regard is through one of three things. Number one being a certain point after the third arc where I will explain some things for the Ketsueki, right? Which obviously consists of Kosoku, Cyrus, Vernay, so on and so forth. There's a little thing that happens after the point of Valka War that will need my lead, right? It's not a terribly long piece, but it is something that sort of brings closure to a loose end in Cyrus and Kosaku's life, right? And from that point, they can then fall into the cast with their subplot mostly complete, and nothing really needs to happen from there, because we all know what the deal is with Kosaku, as is originally known as Vas, right? It's that through ADB, he's looking to kill the Baron von Destrid that was responsible for the collapse of the Ketsueki clan, right? And the subsequent deaths. Point 2, or rather the second noteworthy part that will require my lead on, is to explain some things with the Kiryus, right? Now, obviously, I want them to have their own portion. Much like the Ketsueki stuff, it will be a subplot that runs through ADB, less so much on the Kiryu side, because there's not really much to put on the surface. Most of their stuff happens in their own time. But there is one portion in particular which has to do with Kishine Kemi as a whole that will require my lead. Again, not a terribly long chapter, it's more so to tie some things in a neat bow and then move on with it, right? Third point, or rather, this is not even the part that will need my lead. This is the only part in ADB where I am the lead, right? And that is obviously ADB Valka War. And that obviously decides some things between the Kanemoto Kingdom and the Golzenthower Kingdom, right? It settles some things, it allies some people, and, you know, as is typical with a war in a fantasy setting, is going to put some people 6 feet fucking under permanently, right? But back to my original point, that is what I wanted to mention about me stepping away from the subsidiary DM role, alright? I'm not going to be the supporting DM for this anymore. I'm going to leave it all to Kazuki, because, I mean, frankly, that's the way it should have been, or rather, that's the way it has been from the beginning. But I'm just sort of making a statement about it officially so that it is out there and nobody really expects me to answer anything, because I don't have the answers for you. I mean, even when I thought I would be, I didn't have the answers for you. But the only other point I wanted to... In fact, was there even another point? No. The second point was Valka War, but I've already explained it, so... embarrassing! On the other side of things, I want to talk about TOA, which is a little confusing hodgepodge of things I need to lay out on the table now. I already mentioned in the director's notes, the director's dilemma, that TOA is now fully disassociating from ADB, right? It's taking itself away from that same region and giving itself a bit of identity, right? Now, of course, with the way the SSU works and a lore grab between realities, characters exist in every reality in a different form, right? TOA disassociating itself from ADB only means that everything but sort of the roster changes, if you catch my drift, because it still features a lot of the primary characters that were originally intended, or rather still are intended for ADB, but now working itself into a different region that functions in a similar manner now is its own thing, right? I've given it its own signature, right? Now, I do want to take you through source material that is being used for TOA, which I have actually mentioned before, like the actual map of the region itself, which I'm taking from a really old sketchbook from like school, and I'm gonna revamp it, rework it so that it looks a bit more official. It looks like it's supposed to be an actual fucking map, and it's actually gonna be a bit more what's the word, fantasy. It's a bit more in that genre now, right? Much like I did with the ADV maps, where I actually gave it that color grading. There are other parts of this sketchbook that I do want to note, because obviously looking at these images now, you can tell that fucking hell, my drawing is absolutely shoddy, or was absolutely shoddy. I mean, of course it was. I was like fucking 12, 13 and thought I knew anatomy when I drew everyone like a bunch of cheese strings stuck together with an acorn on top. These characters in particular will obviously get revamped for TOA as well, which would make them exclusive to that, right? Now, obviously, nobody's truly exclusive when it comes to the SSU, because you will always find an equivalent one way or another. But I assure you when I say that I have no intention of reflecting these characters in any other reality of the SSU as it currently stands, right? That may change in the future, but as I currently have it in my head, I want them to just be exclusively for this, right? They may appear in Chronoverse, but that's not the same thing. Now, the last thing I did want to mention about TOA is that a direction I want to take is to actually give it its own art style, right? Now, we all know that I came up off of, when I started digital art, I began to gear towards Dragon Ball, Toriyama's style of art, right? Or at least that was my aim. And my style has always reflected the little permeances that I picked up from that. But what I actually want to do with TOA, just to disambiguate it further, is to intentionally stylize a render of art that exclusively goes for TOA. Now, the majority of the CG that I want to make for it will not actually change from what I am doing now. This is also not me saying that I am changing my art style, because I'm not, right? But for bonus features that I want to include for the project, and for like promotional things that I want to work with around it, I actually want to give it its own art style that I can apply to it, right? So something a little more cartoonish, not in the sense that I want to get lazy and sort of do less details, but I do sort of want to compact things. I want to make the anatomy of characters look a bit more cartoony and irregular, you know? Like, for example, you could have like a character who is a literal fucking hourglass of a physique, right? Like really small middle portion and really like wide bottom and top parts, you know? Or like a really sort of luggy character with short legs and massive fucking arms, you know? You sort of get what I'm trying to say. I want to come up with something that can go alongside it, that doesn't take the main style, but is recognizable for being TOA, right? Sort of like Zenless Zone Zero is doing with its little login bonus screens, where they have like an independent artist that goes and does the little chibis of the characters and stuff, and you can really tell it's heavily stylized because it's outsourced from a different artist, right? Obviously, I'm not going to go and outsource it. I'm going to have to practice myself and try and build this style from the ground up, and hope it doesn't assimilate my main one and I forget how to do that, right? But that is what I want to provide for TOA going forward, as a means to try something new. Now, obviously, I mentioned in the first Paradox portion that I wanted to step it up and do animated stuff, right? But I can't do that for everything, right? It'll take too much time. So do not take this as a guarantee that animated shit will appear anywhere else, right? It will have an inclusion here and there, but it probably won't be the main thing that I want to do with that, because I've already decided that FP will be the animated thing. That's the thing that branches the animation, right? TOA, that will branch its own art style, right? And through the middle ground, like looking at both of those on each side, will probably start to give me more ideas on what I want to do with other series, right? Because as I go to different projects and their own respective realities, I all want them to have something that makes them them, you know, something that I do in those projects that I don't necessarily do in the other ones, right? So yeah, I hope you look forward to that in the future, and I myself am quite excited to see if it works. Now, I have to say this in confidence that it will work, because for all I know, I could go towards this and completely fuck it up and end up doing nothing with it. But I think I'll be all right. Right? I'm confident in my ability to take to something like that. I want to go to Chronoverse, right? I want to talk about Chronoverse. Now, we still know it's deep in the shit. It is stuck in the quicksand. It's not sinking any further, but it's not coming back out the floor just yet. You might lose a shoe in there. To briefly explain, yes, there is no further progress with Chronoverse because it's not as high on the priority list, right? Now, Chronoverse will still run. We're still sort of introducing a lot of the Gnosis, and we're getting into Nihilytics now because we're approaching the turning point, the reset point that I mentioned in the Director's Dilemma announcement. Now, it's important for me to reiterate, like I said in that announcement, that while things will get reset to a certain point, it does not negate any exposition or bonds or anything like that that characters have already made. Those will remain, but I need to draw back where Chronoverse is because I realize with how I want to lengthen it out, I've stepped too far too quickly. It's not quite getting me stuck in a gray zone, but it's getting me in a point where I'm already running out of what limited options I had, you know? Because I can't give you the sweet juicy bits yet because we're not in the main thing. We're not in the main arena yet. We're still in the opening act, right? But I'm not gonna have anything drawn back in the way of communication or exposition as it currently stands, because characters are making bonds with each other from all different realities and all different places, right? There's no point sort of undoing that, right? So things like that will still remain as they are, but I now need to consider what key parts I want to put in before we get to the main thing, before the prologue is over, right? And I still have quite a few hurdles to cross before we even get to that. Now, my next point, actually, speaking of hurdles, is that in OSTs 7, those of you that were at the watch party will remember that I said to you, I teased the next collaboration for Chronoverse. Right now, I haven't dropped one of these in amount of time, but yeah, I have 5 more for you ready to go, right? So I couldn't do an update video and not show you something that I hadn't teased or I hadn't shown anyone yet. So yeah, sit back and enjoy the little teasers. Now, you were probably expecting some of those. I know for a fact that it should have been obvious that 2 of those were going to be involved. But obviously, if you look back on OSTs as 7 and go to the Chronoverse segment, you'll probably recognize which one I was saying was teased right there in front of you and you didn't notice. Okay, I hope that generates some excitement for future collaborations, because obviously there's so much more room to cover. But again, like I said, I don't want to step too far too quickly. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll restrain myself and stop. See, I'm getting the fucking fidgets sitting here even trying to think about what I want to say about it, because I can't fucking ADHD, man. Autism is a hell of a thing. The last thing that really needs mentioning in regards to all of this is that when it comes to 2025, I will be taking a hiatus for the entire year. Right? 2025 is not going to be a year where I do a lot, right, for the projects. The main reason for that is I've been doing this for 8 years now, right? Now, my ambition for this hasn't died at all. There have been parts where I've sort of been grated in progress, where I feel like I'm doing a lot to get nothing in return. And it is beginning to weigh on me, right? Because there were a couple points this year where I thought to myself that even though I'd said a year prior to this that I didn't want to stop doing any of this, I began to feel in myself that I just wanted to quit, right? I wanted to quit with the mandatory things and just do it as a pastime, right? Because I've gotten so far in my own head with this that everything feels professional, right? And to an extent it is, right? Because I treat this like a hobby turned profession, because I've built something off of this. I've enhanced skills that I've had over this. I've toiled away for hours at a time to provide things with the skills that I have now built from these 8 years. And to me, it's personal. Right? It's very close to me now, because it's become such a massive part of my life. But it's in that exact same respect that I begin to realize that it's beginning to take a toll on me, right? Not in the sense that it's too much, but the frequent dissatisfaction I feel for the reception I'm getting, I'm not even sure is entirely fair, right? I don't know whether it's me being overly needy about it or feeling like I deserve more gratification than I get for it, but I think it's for those same reasons that I'm beginning to look at this in a negative way. And I need to take a break from it. Take a break from having commitments to follow that I just need to step away for a bit, right? I'm not prefacing what I want to say correctly, but the point I'm making is I'm getting too far in my own head with it, and I just need to not, you know? Because the only way that future projects are going to be good, or rather enjoyable, is if I'm enjoying the process of making it, right? Now, the process of making things that I'm making right now is fucking fantastic. But it's what's currently happening that I feel is beginning to wane. I can't... Do you know what? It's probably best if I just flat out and fucking say it. The way I feel about what I make at the moment is that only one person is really actually fucking excited for it, and everyone else is kind of just meh, right? And that's not even a point of me wanting to be stingy about it, or just being like, well, why isn't it the same for everyone? But I know, as a producer, as an artist, as an illustrator, as an author, if I cannot generate excitement for the projects I'm creating, I failed. That's the bottom line. Because yeah, sure, I'm not like an A-list content creator. It's not like I can just piss this shit out with no ease, but at the same time, I understand there is a level of professionalism that I have to maintain with it, right? And that's not in the respect that I need a particular mindset, but it's just seeing what I put out and seeing what comes back in return is a good metric for figuring out how well you're doing, right? So it's for that main reason that I'm deciding I need to take a break from it, right? For a whole year, 2025 to 2026, right? Which means there's probably not going to be much to talk about in the update video. In fact, no. It might be precisely because I'm taking a break that there will be even more to talk about, because I'll be producing more concepts. Now, me taking a break does not mean that Season 3 goes on hiatus as well, right? Season 3 will be finished regardless of whether I'm on break or not, okay? Because I promised I would get it done this year, and I still haven't, right? So, January, not even. I can't promise that because of the temporary accommodation situation I'm going through in January. So obviously, because of half of the month being out of home, it probably may be that I have to push it to February now where it will get finished. But this hiatus does not impede the progress of Season 3, right? It will be done. Because I have to do it. Because if I postpone this and I take a break from Season 3 for as long as I'm taking a break, it means we won't get there until 2026, and then it probably won't even be until after that we get to FP. And I don't want to force you guys to wait that long because it's not fair, right? So Season 3 will still get done, and during that hiatus, I will still be progressing other works so that they are ready to go. Okay. So nothing in the way of production actually finishes, but in terms of sessions and such, don't expect anything from a mainline project from me during that year, because it's where I'm looking to take a step back and get back to my foundations. Now, the better things about me taking a break is that I'm going to do several style studies, because I think art's getting a bit too linear now, and I mean that in the sense of my own art. I feel like Actually, I can't even really say that. It's not so much linear, but I feel like I could do more. I feel like I could afford to be a bit more flexible and dynamic with what I produce as an illustrator, right? So I want to do style studies so that I can offer a wider range of visual representation for what I want to create. And at least that way, I can make something that's a bit more appropriate for what I want to get across in the images, right? I will also release quite a few concept arts during this hiatus time, because as we go into FP, I do want to work on things like scenery, right? Now, scenery is not really something I typically tend to work with, but going forward for First Paradox, I want to add scenic illustrations, and I want to improve my work on backgrounds so that it matches with everything else in the scenes, right? Because Lofal is a big industrial jungle of neon lights and copper stains. And I feel it's only right to do it justice in that setting for me to take time and work on concepts, right? I mean, I have to work on concepts anyway, but I'm talking ones that I want to make publicly available so that everyone can see where these things are going, right? And what to expect. So there will be a heavy focus on concept art, right? Which means for extra illustrations and such for First Paradox are likely going to be the main factor there. Now, another thing I actually want to take time to do is family trees. Like, bear with me a moment so that I can actually pull this up as I talk about it. So let's just take a quick look at the two that I've done up until now. So you can see here you've got the origin point, right? You got your two branches. We've got no illustrations for them because we don't know what they look like, right? Then we've got the predecessors there, which have a generational gap in the middle that lead to our current generation. And then you can see our familiar faces that are related to them that we may not have met, and then everything to come after that, right? Nice and simple format, and it explains a lot in such a short space, actually without having to give any sort of word to it. Now, The same can be said about the second one that I want to show you on screen here, the Aggregaris family tree. Now, while it is slightly less compact, it does effectively the same job. It shows you the generational gaps, the ancestors, the predecessors, and the current generation. And even over here, you've got a little mystery segment because, ooh, that might be relevant to the story. Yeah, these kind of things are what I want to do more of during my hiatus period, because I think it's fun. I think it's fun to delve into the history of a family without having to, abstract an entire story for it. Now, obviously, you want to go through an entire story for it, but maybe you're just not there yet, or maybe you're never going to get to a point where you explain everything beforehand because it's just not relevant, right? And that's why I find it fun to do. So, I am offering to do some for people if they want me to do them. Now, it goes without saying that if you want me to do one of these 4 particular characters in your rosters, please specify everything that you want in there and how you want it, because it's no good if you give me like 2 or 3 names and it's like a fucking trifecta image, and it's like, well, you've given me 3, I'm gonna make your fucking Nintendo GameCube logo. Like, but you get what I'm saying. I need a clear, concise, and fruitful list of the lineage, right? Because otherwise there's no point making the map. Now, on the other side of that, if you don't have many people and you want to allow me to take the creative liberty for you, I will add family members to that lineage. Yeah, if you want one done and you will allow me the creative liberty, I will put a map for you to, just explain the lineage a bit better. I don't really have an intelligent way to sort of go about and say this, because it wasn't even something that I did because I wanted to explain it originally. It was originally something I just wanted to do for fun, right? But the more I got into it, the more interesting it became to me, right? Also, the last thing I want to mention is just, I think there's a lot of retcons that I need to go over as well, right? Because I look at the notes for season 1 and I realize all the stuff in there that is so wildly different from how I remember, and so wildly different from what's going into First Paradise. Because I looked at the season 1 retcons the other day, and there's so many details in there that made sense at the time that no longer make sense anymore, right? Now, the only thing I can pick up off the top of my head is the retcon of Jessusai into Hasuka, right? Now, the funny thing is, despite the fact that I always remember her name when the relevant conversation comes up, I looked at the name Jessusai, and finally, after 8 years, I thought to myself, who the fuck is Jessusai, right? Because I know Hasuka for so long, like, I've had it's Hasuka in my head for so long now. I'm actually fucking Mandela affecting myself into this shit, right? But reading through the other seasons, I realize now that there's this points that need fixing or correcting in seasons 2 and 3, right? So during the hiatus period, I'm probably going to go through a list of retcons, like I said I would have done last year, which I didn't, do that, because now I'll have the time for it. 2025 being a hiatus period will also mean that I'm going to take time to sort things in my life, right? Because while I think I can live the dream forever, it's a matter, and it's going to get a bit real here for a second. Time waits for no one, right? Time waits for fucking no one. And I'm 25, and I'm not where I want to be in life, right? I thought I was last year, and I thought I'd be good with where I'm at, but frankly, I need to put more time into myself, okay? Now, that can be for multiple different reasons. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but things are gonna change in my life, right? And I think this is sort of the point where I need to start applying myself a bit more than I am, because I've got to do more, right? It's not really relevant to this video because it's not going to change anything I do in regards to this, but I just think that maybe things might end a bit differently by the end of that year than say they have in the last 3 years. Okay, that's really everything I wanted to talk about this year. You know, this has gone on a lot longer than I thought it would, but I'm sorry this couldn't be as comedic as the last couple of years. But I just the mindset I was in today was just to sort of really address the points, and I just didn't feel like I could do the comedy as well as the serious. So sorry if I let you down and you were expecting fucking memes here, there, and everywhere. I'll put a little sprinkle of some stuff in, but you know, it's just a funny time. It's a funny time we're living in. But you know what? World keeps spinning. I keep moving, and you should keep moving too. Okay? All right. Yeah. Love every single one of you, and bring on 2025 and enjoy your fucking fuck. I've unintentionally made a reference. The point is, enjoy your Christmas. Fucking hell.
A melhor coisa que você vai fazer hoje é mexer a bunda até o chão escutando essa putaria aqui, ó. Duvida não, hein? Duvida não, hein?
Cada um chega com texto, é festa aqui na alta. Cada um chega com texto, é festa aqui na alta. Cada um chega com texto, é festa aqui na alta. Cada um chega com texto, é festa aqui na alta. Cada um chega com texto. Chegou uma, chegou duas, logo após já chegou três. Chegou uma, chegou duas, logo após já chegou três. Uma e bicou no quarto da sala, é bola da vez. Comi uma, agora vou comer seis. Comer seis, comer seis, comer seis, comer seis. Vai brincando pra piscina minha, já chegou outra vez. Ajoelha aqui pro come, vai de boca no cacete. Ajoelha aqui pro come, vai de boca no cacete. Ajoelha aqui pro come, vai de boca no cacete. Ajoelha aqui pro come. Entra seco e sai molhado. Entra seco, entra seco, entra seco e sai molhado. Vai ter que dar. Vai ter que dar. Cada um chega com texto, é festa aqui na alta. Cada um chega com texto, é festa aqui na alta. Cada um chega com texto, é festa aqui na alta. Cada um chega com texto, é festa aqui na alta. Cada um chega com texto. Chegou uma, chegou duas, logo após já chegou três. Chegou uma, chegou duas, logo após já chegou três. Uma e bicou no quarto da sala, é bola da vez. Comi uma, comi duas, agora vou comer seis. Comi uma, comi duas, agora vou comer seis.